You're tuned into The Collective Voice, thought-provoking interviews co-hosted by young adults, fostering deep faith through courageous questions. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this latest episode of the 787 Collective Voice podcast. I hope I'm not delayed, which is something that's happened a lot. Hopefully my audio is good. Good. I'm Cece
You're good.
Suknak Saunier, otherwise known as Phil Senior, which we'll get into in just a second.
Absolutely.
But before we do that, let me introduce my co-host, Phil.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, before we press record, we were talking about how Cece's actually been connected to the 787 Collective longer than I have. And so Cassidi was like, so you're actually like Phil Senior, not Phil Junior.
I think you can claim that title.
You should, we're just going to, from now on, I'm Cece, aka Phil Senior.
Phil Senior. Here I am.
Yes. Welcome everyone. And our guest this week is Cassidi Jackson. Cassidi, this is kind of a random story. So last year, some of us went to the Wild Goose Festival and engaged with what's called the LeadNow, which was a pre-festival. I should say what the Wild Goose Festival is. The Wild Goose, I always describe the Wild Goose Festival, and Cassie, I want to hear how you describe it too. But I'm always like, when people ask me, I'm like, well, it's kind of like Woodstock meets Jesus, maybe. I don't know. And not to say that Jesus wasn't at Woodstock, but like,
I do say like progressive Christian Woodstock is my definition.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. So I went and we were working with the LeadNow, which is for seminary and kind of first in ministry kind of experienced people. And so met Cassidi there and then throughout the Wild Goose Festival, just kind of continue to see you. And then you were a student at Perkins at the time, and then you just graduated. And so as you were graduating, we went and had lunch recently and just kind of were catching up on how life has changed for you in the midst of all of that. And got to hear a lot of your story and thought like this would be a really great episode to have you on. But yeah, I love that we just kind of met randomly, which is hilarious. It took us to go to Harmony, North Carolina to meet one another, even though we're in the same city.
Yeah, I was very surprised that, like, first of all, that there was anyone else from Texas, quite frankly, that was there. And I was like, how have we been in such like close proximity and we meet in North Carolina?
I know, right?
I think it was a fun God thing.
And as I'm a Perkins alum, and I don't do a ton of things at Perkins, but I do some things there. So anyway, just kind of, granted, you are also, we're studying sacred music, right? So I never did anything on sacred music. For anybody who knows me, there's not a lot of sacred music that happens from. However, at the Wild Goose Festival, they close each night with beer and hymns, and that's about as sacred music as I get, because when you're surrounded by a couple hundred people, everyone just singing at the top of their lungs. You can sing as loud as you want. You can't even hear yourself, so it's amazing.
Truly a joyful noise, I think, from a variety of people.
We'll maybe circle back to Wild Goose here in a little bit, because it is coming up, in 787's partnering again with LeadNow and working with what's called the Wild Space Tent, which is a specific tent at the festival for young adults. So we'll do kind of a shameless plug. Maybe we'll kind of wrap on that, but I say that we're talking about it now. Yeah, like, why don't you just dive in there? What was your experience like at the Wild Goose last year, and what drew you there?
Yeah, for sure. Let me just also reiterate that, yes, Cassidi, I did just graduate. I did just graduate from Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University here in Dallas, and I graduated with my sacred music degree after 3 years. I am also a full-time music director at First United Methodist in Gainesville, Texas, which is where I'm moving to in a little bit.
Even though you grew up Presbyterian, right? Isn't that what you told me?
Yes, and I still claim Presbyterian.
Still claim.
So but denominationally been kind of all over the place, and I think musicians especially are quite ecumenical, which is very special. So we can get into more of that detail later.
Yeah, totally.
So the Wild Goose, I have heard of Wild Goose in terms of like the Scotland Iona context first. And so I had heard of this festival and I was like, oh, are they like kind of doing the same thing? What's going on? And so through some funding, through a program that I was in at school, I was able to attend. I volunteered there, which got me a free ticket. And if you're a seminary student, I believe you also get a free ticket, which is a wonderful opportunity. And so, I didn't really know exactly what I was getting myself into. I was just like, this seems really cool and up my alley, so I'll go. And I drove from Dallas to North Carolina, which was a drive out with my partner, and so that certainly helped. And we just pull up on the campgrounds. And Phil, I told you this story. I think we pull up, and I'm just trying to figure out where to go, where to set up camp for the week. And I think it was Tim. I don't remember his last name, but
Tim Kerr.
Tim Kerr
Yep.
had stopped us, and I was like, "Hey, where should we go?" And he was like, "Oh, these are your best spots." And then he was like, "Where are you visiting from?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a seminary student in Dallas." And he was like, "Well, hey, there's this group called LeadNow that is full of seminary students." And I was like, "No way, I have not heard of that." And he was like, "Yeah." And then he introduced me to Jackie, and we like immediately got connected. So I had no idea that that was a thing, and just kind of got plugged in immediately, actually. So it was like from the get-go such a welcoming experience. I don't camp that often, and so that was kind of a different experience for me too, but I ended up really enjoying it. And it ended up being such an impactful time for me. It was such a space of openness, a space to really question and understand and empathize with a lot of people in a lot of different walks of life. And there was just such a joy that I really didn't get to you don't get to experience often in life. And I remember especially the word that came to my mind after Wild Goose was authenticity. There was a very sincere authenticity among all of the people that I met, which again, in our world, you don't often get the chance to experience, whether it's because maybe this place or context you're in is unsafe for a lot of people, especially a lot of our LGBTQ plus friends. And so getting to live in that space and getting to pursue my own spiritual questions or open my mind to other spiritual understandings. Of course, hearing so many amazing people come in and talk about their specific subjects, experiencing all of the music, which is kind of my main thing, right? It was really a very enriching and edifying time for me, as a Christian in my own personal walk.
Yeah, and I'll just go ahead and shout out too that so there's a LeadNow, which is specifically for seminary students, and again, people in kind of their first call of ministry. And there's also this Wild Space Tent, which is, I just love this. The tagline for Wild Space is, it says, a sacred playground for young adults who give a damn, right? So like, if you're not called to vocational ministry and yet you still care and want to be involved in justice work, or like you are already involved in justice work and are doing these things, like there's a space for you. And also you can register for free for the whole festival through the Wild Space Tent as a young adult and participate for free. And so literally all you have to do is get to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm pretty sure there's even like shuttles and stuff to get you back and forth from the airport to Harmony, North Carolina, and we're working with the Wild Space Tent folks to try to even provide some food and stuff so that like it offsets the cost of food and stuff, because there's really good food truck food there. What were the? Did you ever eat those? I forget what they were called, but they were like massive.
Yes,
I can't remember what they were
know
called.
what you're talking about, and I don't remember either.
So, anyway,
just, yeah.
The food was actually good for food truck food. I was impressed.
For sure.
All to say, it's a really cool experience. Did you have anybody music-wise or speakers or anything that really stood out to you?
Oh, I have to shout out my girl Sadie Jackson. She was the guitar player for what is that band collective called? They played a show like every night and helped they played for our final communion moment and service moment, which is wonderful. Sadie, I mean, was just a powerhouse in bringing all of her skill and talent, and also to be able to witness like such amazing musicians that literally gathered together and just had a few days of practice. And to me, that was like awe-inspiring in a lot of different ways. So that was certainly Sadie. I'll shout out her because she was phenomenal and just a really chill person. Yeah.
I'm just looking her up at Sadie Johnson Music on Instagram. So that's what I found.
Hey, free shout out, Sadie.
There you go.
Right there.
This episode brought to you by Sadie Johnson Music.
Hey, yeah.
Love it. No, that's awesome. So again, reach out to us if anyone's curious about attending the Wild Goose. We'd love to meet up with you or hang out with you while
And
you're there.
I'll also shout out Flamey Grant, because I got to see her. She was phenomenal, and I think she'll be back this year too. So,
and if you were
So
like
good.
me, as a Wild Goose outsider who's, you know, and I've heard about it and I've wanted to go for a long time, and so hoping to join, you know, as my 787 role in September with our group. Truly, that invitation, if you're listening to this and you're curious,
Totally.
like, connect with us. We'd love to help make that possible. If you, like me, are sitting here listening to Cassidi and you're like, yeah, okay, maybe I will go to that.
Yeah.
We'd like to help get you there. So,
Yeah, it's exactly right.
yeah.
And yeah, whatever barriers there are, because Cassidy mentioned like camping, like you can literally just bring a tent and
yeah.
But if you
Or
can't
rent a
travel
tent.
with a tent,
Yeah.
you can rent a tent, right? There's like literally somebody who will set up a tent and put an air mattress in there for you, or you can get like what are they, yurts? Is that what they're called?
Yurt.
Like a bigger yurt. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Not an yurt, a yurt. Yurt, whatever.
Yeah, close.
And there's also like a hotel, like 15 or 20 minutes away.
Super.
But I mean,
It's
Some
accessible.
people
There's a
need
lot of options.
some people need a hotel.
some people do. Some people
Yeah.
need a hotel. That's fair.
Yeah,
that's
that's
exactly
fair.
fair. You're right.
Well, Cassidy,
There's options.
I'm interested to hear this thread of authenticity, right? Like you named especially our LGBTQ plus friends and loved ones, and I would say even beyond that, depending on the church, like it could be women, it could be people of color, it could be,
Absolutely.
you know, etc. There's such a tension, I feel, where our sacred spaces are often like not safe spaces or not completely authentic spaces where you can't feel like you can show up completely. I know I've had young adults say that to me, where they say in our young adult group, I can show up very authentically, but in, you know, the congregation I worship at, I feel like I have to be posh or polished or this or that.
Absolutely.
Will you just dwell with us a little bit on that tension? Like you're sitting in the middle of it. I'm sure, I mean, I experienced it even in seminary. Sometimes I'd say stuff in the
Yeah.
classroom, not polished, not, you know, great from my local context, and
Yeah.
there'd be some backlash.
Yeah, I think, you know, what's interesting about this young adult period of life too is we're just trying to figure out who we are as people. And that's a journey that never ends, right? But especially as we step from, you know, sort of our teenager-ish phase and then step into college and higher learning after that. We're just like so scared and so inside of ourselves of like, who am I? What's happening? And as we're discovering ourselves, there can be so much backlash, depending on the context and the space that we're in, right? So for me, going into seminary, a lot of what I was doing was figuring out who am I and what do I truly believe? I said going into seminary, there's two things that I wanted to figure out for myself, and that was my own theology after coming from the Christian sort of evangelical conservative church, and then just becoming a better musician. So when I first get into seminary, I'm learning so many different things about the Bible and about the Christian church that I just didn't know and was truly flabbergasted by. And so I was like, I mean, I had a whole breakdown of what I have believed is no longer a solid foundation for myself. And in that process, you're trying to like wade in deep water, right? Of figuring out where is my island? Where is my safe space? And in a lot of that questioning and a lot of that figuring out, there's not always people that you're surrounded by who can offer that help, that one helping hand. And so I was really blessed when I first came to Dallas. I had a mentor, his name is Adam Spohr, who was very much that voice of, you are welcome to be who you are, and you are welcome to question. And if I did not have that person, that mentor, I really would have been screwed, I think, because how can I live authentically if again, there is not a safe space, but if I don't have someone who's willing to give me the opportunity to be my most authentic self. And I hope eventually we get to the point in our lives where we are a little bit more secure in our own existence, to where it's like, well, hey, I don't care if what you or this person says or blah, blah, blah. Like, I will be my most authentic self no matter what. But it's a very hard time to get to that place. It's a very hard journey. And that's what I have learned in really the past 5 years of my life, is like figuring out that foundation and getting there is really, really challenging. And Perkins itself is a very welcoming community. But like, I just moved across to a different state. I didn't really know anybody. I was having this whole deconstruction of my faith and ideology, and I didn't really know exactly who to turn to. And so, yeah, it's very hard, not just in seminary, but in a lot of our church spaces as well, because there is kind of this at times performativeness, or these expectations of who you're supposed to be, that I am still reckoning with, especially in our American church right now. So it's a journey. It's a journey that I'm still having to figure out, because I'm only 25 and still in this young adult phase. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned mentor. Like, that's something that has come up a lot with a lot of our conversations with young adults, and just the value and importance of it. And you were, I'm going to say fortunate, I guess, because your mentor was also your boss, right? Like, that was the senior
Yes.
pastor at the church that you were working at, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes that can go really well, and sometimes it cannot go quite as well, right?
Exactly. I lucked out I was very blessed to
Yeah.
have those two things coincide, for sure.
Totally. So I wonder if there were other mentors, or like, did you have anybody at Perkins, or like even from back growing up? How have you identified? Because sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Like, you don't, whether you don't want to cross that boundary with the boss, or whatever the case is. So like, maybe like, what are some ways that you've found mentorship beyond just one that kind of like was natural because it was your boss?
Yeah. I think at every step along my journey, I have been very blessed to have a mentor along those ways. Even when I was still growing up in the church, and was heavy in the evangelical side, I had some really kind and great mentors. And so I think when I got to my undergraduate degree, when I was just doing music primarily, and I ended up joining the Presbyterian Church, I had a wonderful mentor there who, again, was just very open and welcomed questioning. She was with me along all of these steps of my journey, not just in sort of the spiritual or theological sense, but people who will walk with you, like, oh, I'm moving, or oh, I just had a terrible breakup, or this, X, Y, and Z is happening that is totally mundane, but I want to share it with you. And having that relationship when I stepped into Texas and into seminary, was, affirming to send me off into that space. And I can always go back and call that person if I ever need more guidance, and I do still keep in contact with her. I think one of the hardest things about Perkins was that I didn't have a mentor at school. It was kind of like my cohort of sacred music students, we were very much relying on each other. And we didn't always feel like maybe we had that underlying emotional or spiritual support that perhaps we were seeking as seminary students. And so I do think that was one of my biggest sort of disappointments, was that we didn't really have, like mentor figures. It was really a lot of us figuring out things by ourselves. And then seeking that outside mentorship, like with my boss, asking for support, which we navigated it with each other. And that's fine. It's so important to have people who are not just your mentors, right? You have friends to rely on. And I am grateful for all of those friends. But not having that sort of, I don't want to say authority voice, but someone who has had more experience than you, right? Who
Totally.
can
Yep.
help you say, it's you're in tricky waters, but like I can help you to my extent to navigate this. Not having that was very difficult. It was challenging.
And so I think that's like a universal, unfortunately, thing to
Yeah.
experience. And so I'm sorry that that was a part of your experience, like giving thanks for the mentors that you've had and lamenting the what more that could have been. I'd be curious to know, because I don't know. What instrument do you play? Like, what is your musician?
Yeah.
Your music of choice, and then wondering as you like take this step from seminary towards like I guess full time at a community that you've already been a part of, which is great. How are you? What has the shift been like? Maybe even how have you seen the shift from studying music in college to then studying it in seminary, and then now what are you hoping to bring to the congregation you'll serve?
Yeah, so I am primarily a singer. I dabble in other instruments, but I am not at all proficient outside of singing. Um, and so my primary role now, going from part-time to full-time, is still just being the music director. So conducting is especially one of my favorite parts of doing music. Um, and I very much value music making together and not just always by myself. Um, and so, I mean, what I'm most familiar with is a lot of classical things. That was my background in my undergraduate, and even coming to seminary, we have to be part of the choir over at the Meadow School of Music. And so, you're doing a lot of like classic literature, choral literature, of course, is what I'm more familiar with. But I will say, my professor in the sacred music program is from Brazil. His name is Marcel Silva Strugernagel. And he brought in a lot of Latin-based music. The breadth of music that we did across various countries and eras and experienced different congregational song was really educational and informative. So again, he's from Brazil, so we did a lot of Latin-based music. And my ability now to kind of just like see Spanish and say it out loud has gotten a lot better, if I do say so myself. I don't always know what it means, but I can say it out loud. And so I think just experiencing more more connective music with one another, and figuring out ways to kind of shape music that fits your congregation better. Uh, that is one of the biggest lessons that I took from Perkins and from my sacred music degree. Is just like figuring out what do I have and what can we make happen from it that is not just always the same hymns that we do every Sunday. And of course, I am still in a Methodist denomination, and so having those routines are very much valued, I think, in the Methodist Church. But I have been trying to push my ensembles and my congregation in ways that are a bit more diverse, a bit more not just the things we do on Sundays, but just slowly pushing them, I think, out of their comfort zone of like, hey, this is a hymn in our hymnal that we've never looked at, but I think, we should try it because there's something to learn here. I'll push my choir with new music that they've perhaps never done. We just did something as we ended our choral season that musically, theoretically, we would call asymmetrical. And that was a huge challenge. And they were like, Cassidy, I don't think we can do this. And I was like, actually, you can. I believe in you and we will happen. And they made it happen. And it was such a great experience. And we got to dive into more poetry by E.E. Cummings. We have a very small band, and our guitar player is Hispanic. And so when I can, I try and introduce more of that style of music or just spotlight him in general and introduce our congregation to more Latin-based hymns because I did have a lot of exposure to that in school. So if there's any shift that's happening, my number one goal is always how can we encounter God in whatever music we're doing, even if it's the older things that we are familiar with, if it's like historically old things that we don't touch, but still have some greater meaning that we can find, or newer things or things outside of our culture. How can we connect to God through those things and then make it a shared experience with our congregation?
Well, I saw the other day something that I thought was really fascinating that was talking about how there was a transition that took place in worship music in like the 80s and 90s that went from like songs that were primarily like a chorus of voices, often sung in unison, to a more distinct like vocalist, often being notes that were, way out of reach for the general audience or general participants or singers, and how that has kind of, I don't want to say overtaken, because I think there's still a lot of churches that stick to the vocal choir aspect of things, unison choir. But definitely, there's often in the church this battle between the like, oh, traditional worship versus modern worship, or contemporary, whatever you want to call it. But I do think that's an interesting. The whole conversation around it was that like there are fewer and fewer people singing in church, and the kind of argument was it's really because the songs that we're singing often aren't as singable as they were in the past, because they were designed to be for a really profound vocalist as opposed to choral singing or group singing. I don't know. I just would love to hear your thoughts on what that looks like, and hearing that you're coming from a space that has a little bit of both, and I'm seeing more and more churches try to either blend or create separate spaces to have opportunities for each. And so just kind of that, could you just solve the big debate? Is it really, should we be traditional worship or modern worship? Solve that for us.
Let me just like fix it for everybody right now.
Fix it right now. Ready to go.
No, so that has been a very hot topic in church music world right now. Is figuring out like what are we holding on to in terms of traditional music, and what are we trying to do in terms of, the word is contemporary that most people use. And while blended worship is kind of the term people have come to, I think scholars are trying to move away from that, because it's really not truly blended, especially when you look outside of the musical aspect. Liturgically, people aren't trying to blend the contemporary side with the traditional side. So convergent is the word that a lot of scholars are trying to push towards. But I think colloquially, people still use blended more often.
It's going to start now, though. We're going to get it more popular right now. Here it goes.
Convergent. Okay. It's convergent, guys. I grew up in the space of like praise and worship band. I remember when I was, I think, still in elementary school, we did have like the band plus choir. And I always wanted to be a part of that in whatever way I could, but I wasn't old enough yet to volunteer. And then when I got into middle school, that choir aspect did push away. And at some point, the sort of more contemporary style church did adopt, like, we have this band, and we do spotlight this vocalist, and we kind of just hope the congregation can sing along with, this bridge that repeats for like 8 minutes and whatnot, right? And then the vocalist has the power to kind of go off and do whatever it is that they want. For me personally, sorry, let me back up and say, when I switched over to the Presbyterian denomination, it was certainly way more traditional in the aspect of like, we have the choir singing every week. We sing and lead the hymns, and like congregation joins in when they can. We have this special anthem that the choral people are singing. I think, honestly, saying it out loud, there are some similarities in that, right? You have the choir who are doing things that are out of the abilities of most average congregation goers, right? And so that's not anything new, but we're still inviting them to sing in hymns that they know, even if maybe they can't always sing the hymns, whatever that vocal range is. We're still inviting them in on that. And it's just kind of a different font with the contemporary band, right? I find value in both. I think a lot of the content of new contemporary music is very shallow in a lot of ways, but there are some really great, like, sort of indie artists who are making music that is more theologically rich in what they're doing. And I think that's worthy of being in our church spaces. But ultimately, getting the more people to sing and be invited is the main goal, because it is not, it should not be a one-way performance. It should be that even if I am leading a song and it's just me singing, like, the congregation should be able to, like, either hum in or join in on the chorus, or they should be able to leave singing it. It Church is not a one-person act. Worshiping is not a one-person act. It is invitational, and hopefully at the end of days, whenever that happens, it is all of us who are singing, right? And we've got to bring heaven down to earth, right?
Yeah.
It should be all of us participating, because otherwise, what's the point?
Wow.
Is kind of my view of it. So I'm not here to solve
I
which
don't know.
one.
I feel like it got solved.
No.
I'm kidding.
Because
Done. Everything's done.
I don't have that much to offer in terms of that. But I do try. I find value in both things, and so I do. You can never do it perfect, and I'm never gonna do it perfectly, but I try my best in ways that I can, and that is accessible for my congregation to participate. And a lot of that is just knowing context. A lot of that's knowing your congregation. A lot of that is knowing more hymnody and congregational singing across the world and history, right? I hope that is somehow enlightening.
Yeah. No, I really love that. And I want to ask you like 10 questions. And so I'll try to be more concise. And I'll say, this is all just so different and dependent church by church, right? Like, it depends on like who's in the room, what the size of the staff is, what the abilities are and ranges, what the church music tradition is. I was talking with some members of a congregation I went to visit, and they were saying, I grew up Baptist, I grew up Methodist, I grew up this. And so like, I miss the hymns that are on my heart. The ones that I can remember that I grew up with. And when I went into a parish, I have hymns that are on my heart that help me connect to God, that help me connect to place and time that are past, or people that are past. And like, honestly, I want to hear them. And so I had so much fun when I was in the congregation I served, and really took a lot of liberty. Part of it is because I had to, as the only staff person there. So I got to pick what I wanted to sing. And it was a little tough on the congregation, because some of the songs I introduced them to, they didn't know. They didn't know they didn't know the rhythm, they didn't know the words. So I put a favorite hymn card in their bulletins one Sunday, and made a list of what their favorites were, and that was really wonderful and a really fun scope. I'm wondering, Cassidy, I want to hear a little bit about these indie hymn writers. I also would love to know your favorite. And I'm a hymn girl. Like, I have to be honest. I grew up in a liturgical tradition, so like, I love hymns. So I want to know your favorite. And then I also just really want to know, like, when you're listening to music, what are you listening to? And how do you engage like secular music? One of my friends is a pastor, and she makes playlists for liturgical seasons that are just completely secular. And so I have her Advent playlist, and I have her Lent playlist, and I just love that.
I have a lot more to say about the secular music thing, but I'll backtrack. A lot of like indie artists indie like Christian writing artists, I feel, are people who grew up in the church and didn't find like their own perhaps like theology or experiences really reflected in music, right? Especially if we're using a lot of older hymns, it can be really hard to connect when it's a lot of older language, right? And there is such a fine balance I think it's like the whole music director's like plight is, how do we balance giving people the things they're familiar with versus introducing new hymns, a new congregational song that kind of has either better theology or is just written in newer like words, not old English and whatnot. So it is a fine balance, and I have to carefully consider that every Sunday, and I take that very seriously. Um, the music that I am listening to, my favorite hymn, I should say, before I continue, is Come, O Thou Traveler Unknown, which I believe is a Charles Wesley text, but it has a lilting Celtic tune. And it just talks about greeting greeting Jesus on this journey of life and realizing, oh, it's love. I have found love. And it just sings so well, and it's just one of my favorites. Um,
Can you say that
I
title for me
actually,
one more time? Just because I
yes,
have never heard of that, and so I'm going to listen afterwards.
yeah, Come, O Thou Traveler Unknown. I
I'll link in
think,
the show notes too. It's good.
yeah, I think it's a Charles Wesley text, and there's
It
like
is.
tons of verses that are listed in the Methodist hymnal. Um, and so I just kind of substitute some in that best fit sort of our message for the day. But it's a beautiful tune and melody, and I love the words in that too. Um, the music that I'm listening to, so I actually wrote a paper about how secular music, and I use quotes very intentionally, uh, is just as able to connect us with God as sacred music, which is why I'm like, the terms sacred and secular really don't mean anything when you can encounter God no matter what. And so one of my favorite bands is Florence and the Machine. I recently
Let's
saw her in
go.
concert.
Yes.
Yes, and I mean, there are a lot of people who have written about Florence specifically in having some kind of like spiritual or religious experience, and there is definitely a reason for that. Um, and so I remember at some point in my undergraduate, it was maybe 2021, so still kind of in that COVID-y season, and I was not in a great space. I was very depressed and anxious all the time. And in a lot of ways, I was very angry at God at how like my life was going. And Florence had come out with a song or an album called Dance Fever, where she is literally wrestling with uh, sort of the expectations placed upon you, placed upon women specifically, and growing up as a woman. Um, and she uses so many religious metaphors to explain that. And so I found so much comfort in being able to say, like, God, why is this happening to me? You won't get away with this, blah, 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 and having sort of this rebellion, and then eventually coming to the end of like, okay, you know what? I'm really tired, and God, maybe this hasn't been solved, but there's sort of a surrender that's happening here at some point. And so, like, even though I was very angry at God and a lot of that, that was still a way that I was developing my spiritual relationship with God. And so, if there's any song that someone comes across and they're like, well, now I'm rethinking sort of how I feel about this, how maybe I can communicate with God. Maybe this is speaking to me somehow in this specific phase of my life, and the artist doesn't mention God at all, but this reminds me of how I'm approaching God. Or maybe like, hey, the whole God thing is not my thing at all, but maybe I'm viewing Christianity a different way, or maybe I'm viewing spirituality a different way, and maybe I'm just connecting a little bit more with the people around me. Like, God is able to work through anything if we just open ourselves to that experience. And so secular music, I mean, it's why is it even secular if that can be the case, if we're really listening and really trying to dive into the message? And so I love when people create whole playlists for a liturgical season that aren't explicitly meant for church or meant to be sung in church, right? And I think I wish more people could see that too, and not just totally like, oh, well, this isn't Christian, this isn't my usual, right? I wish there was more of an openness in that, because you never know when you can encounter God in music. Because it's such a it's such a relational thing, and even just the act of singing a song with someone else, like, you are bonded so deeply in that moment because you are using your voice together.
Yes.
So that's very much where I stand with that. I'm very passionate about specifically.
No, I love it. I love it. I was a couple weeks ago, we were visiting my brother and sister-in-law in Dallas who have a newborn, our niece. We met her at 1 month old, and they took her to do a bath. They came out and she was just inconsolable. And my sister-in-law was soaking wet from the bath, and my brother-in-law was cleaning stuff up. And I said, "Give me the baby." And they said, maybe go outside. Like, she likes the different feel. And so we go outside, we're close to the AC fan, so there's some white noise. And I just start singing to her, Don't Stop by Fleetwood Mac. And then my husband comes out, and she's asleep now. Like, the rocking, the singing, the white noise of the fan, and he's just like eyes wide open. He's like, "You got that baby to calm down." And I was then singing "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey. And Mike comes over, my husband, and he starts singing it with me. And we're just dancing with this baby, and I have tears in my eyes. And so yesterday I'm on my drive home, and on a playlist, "Don't Stop" by Fleetwood Mac comes on. And I have, again, tears in my eyes thinking about my niece. And I'm like, I wonder one day if I can dance with her at her wedding to this song, right? And like,
Gosh, that's
is that not a spiritual experience to like almost have a vision and a hope and a dream for the future? So I love this thought that you're having, Cassidy, and that you're putting it, you're writing a paper about it. You're probably, hopefully bringing it to your congregation. You're amplifying it. I love Florence The Machine, so I'm going to listen to that album today. Listen to the band MisterWives if you don't know them.
Scream. I've heard of them, but not really listened.
Wait, who was it, CC?
MisterWives, my favorite band. At the last concert I ever saw before the pandemic was in Chicago. MisterWives, super awesome venue, the most electric night.
Oh my gosh.
Truly amazing.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's what, and we had a young adult one time talk about how he thought that music festivals were replacing church. He was like, this is where people my age want to go to hang out. And like, this is where they get their singing, and this is where they have community. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's but it does speak to something that like, there's a profound experience that happens whenever we do join our voices together. And I think that like, I'm being reminded of, I was rereading one of Doug Padgett's book the other day, and he talks about like the idea of resonance, of that, like there's a, at the quantum level, right? Like everything is vibrating, and there's something about this joining our vibrations together, and whether that's through the playing of music, the singing of music, like there is just something that happens. Like one of the most profound experience I've had lately, beyond beer and hymns at Wild Goose, because it's still amazing, but was at a Avid Brothers at Red Rocks, right? Like however many, I don't know, 1,500 people, whatever is at Red Rocks, 2,000, whatever, that like clouds are blowing in behind us, behind the stage, and it's like the storm off in the distance, and everyone's just like screaming at the top of their lungs, like screaming, singing, same thing. Like, and it's just like something transcendent is happening in that moment of like, and it's just a really beautiful setting too, right? That helps too. But something happens with music, right? That in a lot of ways, I don't know, maybe there is a better way of explaining it, and that's probably what you got a whole degree on, but like, some of it feels unexplainable too, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of scholars have tried to put it into words for sure, and they'll even go the scientific aspect of like, hey, our resonance is aligning here, or like we're releasing some specific hormone that is aligning, or our heartbeats are aligning too. But there is something, when you are really in the moment with so many other people, there's something unspeakable. And to me, that is when heaven is the most accessible. That is when God feels tangible. In a way, that's so hard to describe.
I know our time is wrapping here, and I just love this conversation. It's so beautiful. And so one of the favorite questions we love to end on is just like, where are you experiencing beauty lately? And, in some ways, I think you've touched on it probably already, but maybe there's additional spaces that you'd like to share where you're experiencing beauty in the world right now.
What a wonderful question, because I think we were commiserating about the lack of nature in Dallas.
We may have been, yes.
Yes, and a lot of the beauty that I see is found in nature. But I'm trying more and more to be intentional about where I find beauty, because it feels very hard uh, in this day. And really, it's in the people that I see around me. It's in small moments of joy and really the mundane, uh, where life is just happening, that I'm like, this in itself is beautiful. I have to specifically call out my partner. He is one of the most like outgoing and optimistic people that I have ever met. Um, and when I observe his patience a lot of times, his openness in meeting other people, I'm like, that in itself is so beautiful, because I'm not a very patient person, if I'm being honest, and I'm very introverted, so sometimes it's very hard for me to communicate. Uh, and so it's just, I've been seeing people connect right now, because divisiveness is so easy, and it's so prevalent. And so I'm learning to really find the beauty in, how am I connecting with this person? I was at a bookstore the other day, and the person who was scanning my books at the register, we just had a lovely little conversation about the book that I was buying, and about, where we were on our life journeys. And to me, that moment was so beautiful, because I've never met you before. I walked by this bookstore a million times, and this is my first time going in. And what a, divine coincidence that we get to have this conversation and connect. And we may never see each other again, but I have wished you well on your journey, and you have wished me well on mine. And I mean, those small things are so important, because that's really where we get to see the humanity in one another. And hopefully people are learning to love each other in those very small, mundane moments, but they are so easy to miss. So that is my answer.
Cassidi, what a gift to hear your reflections and learn about your life and your ministry. We congratulate you on completing your degree in sacred music, and wish you so well in this period of transition, moving into full-time ministry.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. This was such a fun conversation. And you both are wonderful humans. I'm so glad I got to be here.
And for those listening, if you are around Gainesville, Texas, and you want to listen to some good music, seems like you
or
can find
Dallas. I'll still be around there too.
You can engage with Cassidi in that way. And thanks for listening again to The Collective Voice.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice, the premier podcast of the 787 Collective. For more information, visit us at 787collective.org or find us on social media. And if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate us, and share a review. For when you do, you are tricking the algorithm for the common good.